my side. I hope you're still all awake and concentrated. I must confess that I nipped out a little bit during one of the earlier talks to have a coffee, so I'm awake. Are you awake? Good. Okay. My name is Jussi Angesleva, and I'm coming from Berlin, even though I'm originally from Finland. And just to kind of summarize, I find it's very interesting. I can very much relate to all the three previous talkers in a sense that I'm kind of, in my own work, I'm somehow always in between disciplines. So on one hand, I am working as an independent artist. I am working for a bigger company. And then I'm also teaching at the university and engaging in the academic work. So what I will be showing is maybe kind of going back and forth between some of the sort of overtones that what we've heard earlier on today.
안녕하세요. 제 이름은 제시 안제슬레바이고요. 저는 통역을 맡은 홍익대학교 시각디자인과 김민영이라고 합니다. 우선 제시 선생님은 베를린에서 바로 오셨고요. 원래는 핀란드 분이신데 지금 베를린에서 계속 일을 하시고 계시고, 이제 오늘 보여드릴 세미나 내용은 어떻게 보면은 이제 우리가 지금까지 봐온 세미나의 내용들을 왔다 갔다 할 수도 있다고 말씀하셨어요. 왜냐하면 선생님께서는 이제 아티스트이기도 하고 대학에서 가르치기도 하고 큰 회사를 위해서 일을 하기도 하기 때문에 내용이 중첩이 될 수도 있다고 말씀하십니다.
So I've called my talk today, I was trying hard to find some reasonable name, and last minute, maybe 10 minutes ago, I've decided that my talk will be called In Situ Magic. The magic in this case referring to the magic that technology creates and the magic that design and artistic expression creates in the experience. So on one hand, technology today is for many people actually incomprehensible. It makes things possible that are magic. But it kind of applies to the magic of the brain, the sort of logic magic. How is this possible? Design and art kind of applies to the magic of the heart, maybe, and that of the emotion, to create sort of powerful experiences. And what I'm trying to do is juggling between these two.
네, 오늘 세미나의 타이틀을 많이 고민을 하다가 방금 10분 전에 정한 게 이제 인시추 매직이라는 건데요. 매직이라는 거는 이제 여러 의미를 둘 수 있는데 뭐 테크놀로지가 만들 수 있는 매직일 수도 있고, 디자인과 아트를 통해서 얻은 경험이 이루어내는 그런 매직일 수도 있고, 그러한 것들이 합쳐져서 이제 정말 매직스러운 것들을 가능하게 하는 매직일 수도 있고, 뭐 이런 말씀을 하셨습니다.
And one more thing about that, in that for me it feels like when I'm trying to come with technological solutions, or technology development in general is very much about coming up with universal solutions. Me as a designer, I'm lazy. I try to get the simplest thing possible to get the job done. And this is the sort of balancing act to find the universal solution that works for many things, or try to chop off everything else out, that all you're left with is very simple, but it does that one thing right.
네, 저는 이제 기술적인 솔루션을 생각을 했을 때 이제 유니버셜한 솔루션을 생각하게 되는데요. 저는 이제 아티스트로서 굉장히 게으른 사람이어서 무언가를 해결을 할 때, 일을 할 때 굉장히 가장 쉽고 간편한 방법을 택하려고 하고, 그렇기 때문에 어떻게 보면 유니버설한 솔루션으로 되기도 하는 것 같다고, 모든 면에 있어서 이제 해결이 될 수 있는 가장 간단한 방법으로 이제 해결을 한다고.
So a little taster of something like that. I created this is just an independent little artwork in Berlin. We made some posters that when you walk in front of it, there's a big flashlight that flashes you into the poster. So this is how the poster looks like by itself. It's printed with fluorescent ink. If you walk by, you cast a shadow and you get captured into the poster. It's kind of reverse of augmented reality in a way.
이거는 이제 베를린에서 그냥 개별적으로 한 그런 포스터 작품인데요. 이제 프로젝션으로 이제 디자인한 포스터가 이렇게 되고 그 앞에 내 자신이 이렇게 지나가면서 내 자신이 포스터와 함께 되면서 하나의 포스터가 완성이 되는 거죠. 그래서 AR을 반대로 해석한 거라고 하십니다.
It's about designing experiences in physical space. So as you walk through this space, just as what with mobile device-enabled augmented reality experiences are, they relate to your immediate surroundings. This is really low-tech, but it creates very powerful identification with the space.
이거는 이제 실제 경험으로 디자인을 하는 거고 굉장히 낮은 테크놀로지, 낮은 기술력으로 굉장히 파워풀한 작업을 한 거라고 하십니다.
So, but now let's get back to more into focus. So I'm splitting my time between design agency Art+Com, which is based in Berlin, has been around doing new media since '88. I wasn't there quite at the beginning, and the new media after more than 20 years seems almost like an oxymoron, but at the same time, just as with the term augmented reality, we know what it means even though the etymological roots might not be one-to-one correct.
네, 저는 이제 근본적인 얘기로 다시 돌아가자면 이제 디자인 에이전시 아트컴에서 일을 했고요. 88년도부터 뉴미디어를 했었는데 이제 자기는 그렇게 옛날부터 있었던 건 아니지만 쭉 일을 했었고 AR에 대해서는 이제 그때부터 한 건 아니지만 알기는 한다고.
So in parallel, I'm also teaching at the University of Arts in Berlin, digital media design, and trying to kind of look at different ways of creating technologies, dealing with meaningful matter through technological means. But I think now the core focus for me is looking at the sort of design of spaces, a lot of that I've been able to do through the work at Artcom. I start to go to the beginning of sort of AR research. This is a project from mid-90s from Artcom, looking at the first sort of portable devices augmented with motion trackers, so you can have this augmented reality experience.
네, 저는 이제 베를린 대학교에서도 계속 일을 하고 있고요. 이제 만드는 것과 뜻깊은 것을 대하는 그 두 가지를 함께 하려고 하고 있고, 이제 이 작품은 90년대 중반쯤에 한 작업인데요. 이렇게 저 디바이스를 통해서 이제 증강현실을 볼 수 있는 그런.
So there was lots of technological challenges, of course, as what we also heard earlier today, in creating these sort of mixed reality or augmented reality environments. At the same time, it is very, very much about the sort of design language that you use to apply these 2D markers and relate them with the 3D space. And these were some of the early work, so from mid-90s, looking at how you can combine these environments. This was for Mercedes-Benz for their trade fair show.
이것 또한 90년대 중반에 했던 작업인데요. 이제 메르세데스 벤츠의 그런 페어를 위해서 만든 거였는데, 이제 실제 그런 상황하고 그 AR을 통해서 보여주는 가상현실하고 같이 이렇게 믹스를 하는 작업을 이제 계속 하셨다고 하십니다.
In this context, what we we in this case make it very clear. I am now working at Artcom, but I wasn't working there at mid-90s. I've been there for the last 6 years. But what they back then did was learned very quickly that this sort of free in-space navigation of physical objects without haptic feedback turned out to be quite difficult. So having mechanical support for navigation, having sort of a absolute frame of reference was very important.
네, 그때 당시 저는 아트컴에서 일하고 있지 않았지만 그들이 했던 작업은 이제 저렇게 손으로 잡힐 수 있는 것을 통해서 가상현실을 보여주는 작업을 이제 많이 하셨다고 합니다.
So this was one of those early experiments. It's a virtual car that is invisible, that you can walk through. The sort of benefit of, in this case, of this kind of augmentation was to say that you can customize, change colors, change parts, do all this kind of stuff, and still intuitively navigate through the 3D space. This was the time when you would normally, people were accustomed to sort of data gloves, point the finger to move forwards, and these kind of rather cumbersome navigations. This is one-to-one absolute mapping of human size or one-to-one size car, and you can kind of slice through it with this moving monitor.
이거는 이제 한 단계 더 업그레이드 된 작업인데요. 이제 눈에 보이지 않는 투명한 차가 1:1 사이즈로 실제 사이즈로 저기에 있고, 저기 아까 보시는 저 디바이스를 통해서 이렇게 보면은 이제 차가 보이는 거죠. 그래서 실제로 바로바로 색깔을 바꾸고 뭐 타이어를 바꾸고 기계를 바꾸고 그런 식으로 원초적으로 바로 이제 반응할 수 있는 그런.
So whereas in today's sort of mobile devices in the same sort of form factor, you don't really need this huge crane to support the weight, but at the same time, moving freely in hand, you can't leave the device there to interact with it more fluidly. So this kind of, the double function of this crane was to support the weight of the thing, but also give it stability. And I think today's AR interfaces, this is still quite a challenge.
네, 저 이제 디바이스의 역할은 무게 중심을 잡는 것도 있지만 이제 지속적으로 이렇게 움직일 수 있도록 만들어주는 것도 있고, 아직까지도 이제 그거를 벗어나기가 좀 힘든 것 같다는 말씀을 하십니다.
So, but this installation was to say free movement for the user within the constraints of the virtual space here. We also remember maybe from the same age the promise of virtual reality, that you could start sort of navigating these amazing worlds. Sort of the film as medium would be seeing its end, because now we can jump into the virtual worlds and freely move around and experience the cinematic world through first-hand experience. It didn't work because we like actually to have the director to provide the best vantage points. So free movement is not always the best way to tell a story. Yes? Okay, then I continue. Free movement is not the best way to tell the story. So learning from this window into virtuality where you can move freely around, this is again kind of employing very much the same augmented reality way of looking, but limiting it into one fixed location.
네, 그러니까 자유로운 움직임으로 우리는 이제 옛날에 자주 상상을 했듯이 이렇게 우리가 모든 것을 상상한 게 이렇게 자유로운 움직임을 통해서 다 얻을 수 있고 이런 거를 바랬었지만, 사실상 이렇게 영화를 봐도 감독이 필요한 이유는 우리가 보고 싶은 것을 가장 이렇게 효과적으로 볼 수 있도록 제어를 해주어야 되기 때문에 자유롭게 움직이면서 모든 가상현실을 느끼는 게 가장 좋은 해결책은 아니라고 하셨고요. 그렇기 때문에 이제 이 작업이 나오는데요.
So the device is called Timescope. It's filled with a computer and it's fixed on one location in space. The software is designed for that location only. Therefore, you cannot move it, otherwise it would make no sense.
이제 이 디바이스는 모두 컴퓨터로 만들어져 있고요. 이제 그 자리에서만 있을 수 있고 어디에도 움직일 수가 없어요. 왜냐면 그 내용물은 그 자리에서만 보여줄 수 있도록 만들어져 있기 때문입니다.
So when you look through it, you can navigate through historical events in a location. The first installations of this kind we did in Berlin, and as you know, Berlin has very vivid history. For example, here you can see the Berlin Wall from its construction, or before it was constructed, to the present day, and how the cityscape changed. So you can turn the device, and as you turn it, you can still pan the environment, but you can't move it into different locations. Then you can zoom in time. And just as we know from AR interfaces, there's always these labels that give you the reference, what you're looking at. It's very simple in this case because we don't have to move the device. We could pre-produce all this content, but therefore create very, very seamless and perfectly matching experience. And this is, of course, we kind of, by giving constraints, we can reach the sort of ideal that if you come up with a universal solution, it is normally not so possible.
네, 이 디바이스는 그 자리에서 볼 수 있는 베를린의 역사를 볼 수 있고요. 베를린은 아시다시피 굉장히 이제 파란만장한 역사를 가지고 있기 때문에 이제 연도별로 이렇게 볼 수 있고요. 저 위쪽에는 이제 그래서 그런 연도에 대한 정보 같은 것이 함께 AR로 나오고요. 이 디바이스는 움직일 수 없고 그 자리에서밖에 작동하지 않지만 그렇기 때문에 굉장히 퀄리티가 높고 매끈하고 이제 완벽하게 내가 원하는 것과 매칭하는 정보를 줄 수 있어서 반드시 많은 것을 할 수 있다고 해서 유니버설한 솔루션이 되는 건 아니라고 하십니다.
And so if we compare this to the sort of maybe more traditional approach, if you would say, okay, let's have an augmented reality experience in space and show old photographs or old film footage from one location, we would then have to place those pictures in corresponding locations. What we did instead was we created these simulations based on old photographs because, of course, there was no perfect picture from the exact same location over the years. So all of these historical images are actually photoshopped compilations of many, many photographs. But the story being the communication of the history, not a display case of photographs, it was, from our point of view, justified to manipulate the images to match the perspective, therefore creating a much more seamless, immersive experience.
네, 그때 당시에 그런 오래된 사진들이 많이 있을 수가 없기 때문에 이제 엄청나게 많은 사진들을 모아서 이제 엄청나게 많은 포토샵 작업을 통해서 이렇게 매끈하고 이렇게 완벽한 사진을 구현할 수가 있었다고 하십니다.
So, learning from these experiences, then we had another opportunity to create sort of time traveling, but now a little bit further back in time. This is the Natural History Museum in Berlin, and they have this wonderful gallery like showcasing dinosaur bones. The gallery looks like this. And here, all these little dots that have this M written on them, they are media installations. Normally, media installations in space are big and prominent, but as you can see in this picture, you don't see any of the media. It's just the beauty of the space and of the specimen that are in the foreground.
네, 이거는 이제 베를린에 있는 Natural History Museum이고요. 이제 여기에 많은 오래된 공룡들의 뼈가 전시되어 있고, 이제 미디어 인스톨레이션이 아까 맵에 나와 있는 그 스티커가 이렇게 부착되어 있는 부분이 이제 미디어 인스톨레이션이 있는 부분입니다.
So here is again a variation of the time scope, in this case looking back into the prehistoric times, and I give you a little view of how the system works. So I have like kind of a live demo. So when you look through the device, what you see is the gallery itself, and by then turning the view into one of the dinosaurs, what is interesting here for me is that since we cannot change the physical space, but we can change the virtual space, we created these stories that are very short. They start and end with the same frame. So they're kind of these momentary time travels to a different location, but for the audience, they suddenly can see these artifacts in a completely different light. And of course, kids like that kind of stuff. But what is actually, for me, this was not obvious, and it was actually really, really interesting that came as a result of a piece of research. So this is the setup. We have 3 of these devices, and then on the floor there's a 4th one with a big screen showing the same content, and a little pointer that you can move. So instead of having immersion, you have big screen on the floor and a pointer, but the same story. The audience loves that more. because they can talk to each other. So, in a way, what we are always thinking is this sort of one-to-one matching of the closer we can replicate the reality. So, you look into the space, you look the thing, and it's the same thing. Human brain is clever enough to look on the floor and seeing this picture of the space and have the suspense of disbelief, whilst being able to talk with your friends and family about the subject. And I think this is a big sort of different mentality of trying to solve the technological problem or to try to create experience for people.
네, 이 박물관에서 보이는 것은 아까 베를린 도시에서 보았던 이제 타임스코프의 다른 버전인 거죠. 박물관 버전인 건데, 이제 아까 보셨듯이 이제 저 세 가지 디바이스는 아까의 타임스코프와 똑같이 이제 자기가 이렇게 보고 하는 건데, 마지막 하나는 스크린에 직접 보여지고 포인터로 이렇게 바꿀 수 있는, 내용은 똑같고 이제 그런 건데 사람들은 그쪽을 더 좋아한대요. 왜냐면 그거를 보면서 함께 이야기할 수 있기 때문이고, 이제 그것이 굉장히 좋다고 선생님이 생각하신 거는, 사람들은 실제로 스크린에서 보고 그 공룡뼈를 이렇게 보고 비교를 하면서 그것을 충분히 상상할 수 있는 능력이 있고, 그것을 통해서 이제 경험을 디자인할 수 있다고 생각을 하십니다.
So when I was putting this presentation together, I realized that there's this funny reverse timeline what I'm now going through. We started with really technologically high-end stuff, and things are getting simpler and simpler. And now the next project I'll show you, they're getting even simpler than before. This was a project that we did for the city of Berlin. Berlin is famous a little bit like Hollywood in European context, so it's a film capital. And there was this request for us to create a landmark that commemorates the film professionals, the stars and celebrities in the public space.
네, 저희는 굉장히 재미있는 게, 처음에는 굉장히 하이 테크놀로지로 시작을 했는데 갈수록 굉장히 테크놀로지는 별로 중요시하지 않게 됐는데, 이제 지금 보여드린 작품은 더 심플해진 그런 작품 중에 하나인데요. 베를린은 이제 그런 영화 도시로서도 굉장히 유명한데, 이제 그런 영화 산업에서 이제 랜드마크를 하나 만들어줬으면 좋겠다라고 부탁을 해서 작업한 작품입니다.
So, but we didn't want to create this sort of a traditional walk of fame, as you would know from Los Angeles, from Hollywood, with the stars on the floor with names printed on them. But we wanted to focus on the interaction, the sort of moment where the fans come close to their stars. And the moment is this. Ta-da! The red carpet reception, for example, for Oscars and what have you. We wanted to create this moment as a permanent installation.
네, LA에서 볼 수 있는 그런 로드 오브 페임처럼 그런 보편적인 방식으로 자기들을 하기 싫어서 생각을 많이 한 결과, 그런 스타와 관객들에서 가장 이렇게 두근거리는 순간이 무엇인가라고 생각을 했을 때, 이제 이 장면, 그 레드 카펫에 서 있는 스타를 막 뒤에서 파파라치가 찍고 있고, 이제 이 장면을 생각하셨다고 합니다.
So, what is the red carpet défilé made of? It's 4 things that we used. Firstly, it's obviously the red carpet. In this case, translated into red asphalt, covering a 300-meter strip in central Berlin, with the corner of the carpet providing the legend to understand what it's all about. Then there's the star, in this case, in the old school way. And thirdly, there are the paparazzi, who will snap endless number of photos of the stars that we translated into these stargazers, these viewers through which people can see the stars. Very low tech. It's a normal photographic slide and a mirror and like a see-through mirror. So when you look through the thing, you will see the star standing on his or her star on the floor. And it looks something like this. So there's augmented reality sort of reduced to the absolute minimum. And then finally, of course, there's the limelight that is then animated along the street. as a sequence in the evening.
네, 저희는 아까 그 사진 장면을 보았을 때 네 가지를 생각을 했어요. 첫 번째는 레드카펫이고, 두 번째는 스타, 그리고 세 번째는 파파라치, 네 번째는 이제 플래시 라이트인데, 레드카펫은 말 그대로 아까처럼 이렇게 레드카펫을 만들었고요. 레드카펫 끝 쪽에 이렇게 휘어지면서 이제 그 스타에 대한 설명이나 뭐 전체적인 그 로드에 대한 설명이 되어 있고, 두 번째 스타는 실제로 이제 스타를 오래된 방식으로 이제 스타를 박았다고 하셨고, 세 번째 이제 파파라치는 아까 보신 가장 중요한 부분인데, 굉장히 낮은 테크놀로지로 홀로그램과 이제 그 기본적인 포토 방식으로 해서 이렇게 보면은 홀로그램으로 스타가 서 있고, 이제 그것을 보면서 같이 사진을 찍을 수 있는 거죠. 그리고 네 번째 플래시는 밤이 되면 이렇게 플래시가 나오도록 만들어졌다고 합니다.
So this is how it looks like. Close up of these brass devices. There's no electronics whatsoever in them. And then, of course, the stars then enjoyed the opening, looking at their own representations. But maybe the most interesting thing for me is that actually these are highly interactive, and they're networked, and they're internet connected, because people take photos with their cameras and with their mobile phones with their stars, posing with their friends, upload them into Flickrs and whatnots in the internet, and then this whole installation has its own kind of life outside its own sort of physical constraints.
네, 이거는 그 어떤 전기도 사용하고 있지 않고요. 당연히 스타들은 오프닝 때 와서 자기들의 홀로그램을 보면서 즐겼고, 이 작업을 보면서 굉장히 흥미롭다고 느낀 것은 그 어떤 전기도 없고 그런 상태에서도 굉장히 인터랙티브하고 서로 연결되어 있다고 느껴지는 게, 그 홀로그램 스타와 본인이 사진을 찍고 그것을 인터넷에 올리죠. 인터넷에 올리면서 또 이렇게 상호작용이 되면서 다 연결이 되는 것이, 그것 자체는 생명을 갖고 있지 않지만 그것 밖에서 많은 생명을 부여하고 있다고 생각을 하고 있다고 하십니다.
But of course, have to say at this point that this is not to say that this is any better way to work than to try to solve the hard problems, the universal problems of how to create augmented reality experiences. This is just a different way, and the focus is different. So for us, instead of having to require everybody to have a mobile device preloaded with the given software and knowing that there's something to be discovered in this location, we designed the physical space as a kind of index of for the discovery, and provided the technology as an external view that everybody can then use. And if this is the story in this case, so we want to show the stars of the Berlin or the German film industry, we could say that, okay, in this form of augmented reality, there's if 10,000 people would have the software installed in their device, they could experience it in this one location. But if we make one device and 10,000 people will come to that device, there's an eerie balance with making one-off things for many users or many instances of one application for one use.
네, 이것이 반드시 유니버설 솔루션에 대한 좋은 예라고 하는 게 아니라 단지 초점이 다르고 다른 방식이라고 말씀을 하셨고요. 모두가 그런 모바일 디바이스를 갖고 있고 뭐 모든 게 인스톨 되어 있고 그런 상황에서 와서 하고 이런 것보다는 자기들은 이제 실질적으로 육체적인 장소를 제공하고 만들면서 테크놀로지는 단지 이제 두 번째 방식으로 표현을 했을 뿐이고, 이제 10만 명의 사람들이 예를 들어서 온다면 그 사람들이 모두 뭐 디바이스에 그렇게 다 준비되어 있어서 한 자리에 오는 것보다는 그 자리에서 더 많은 사람들에게 그 하나의 테크놀로지로 많은 것을 부여할 수 있는 게 더 낫다고 생각을 하셨다고 합니다.
So back to the beginning, technology and design and arts have different kind of magic. This is now looking at this different aspect. So not directly augmented reality in the first-person viewpoint into layering digital and analog information, but to create this seamless integration of these two spaces. We did this installation for a company called Otto Bock that makes prosthetics. So it makes spare parts for human body. They made a new headquarter, built a new headquarter in Berlin, and we did different installations there. This one is a kinetic sculpture that invites people to come in, but also is interactive from the inside.
네, 처음으로 돌아와서 이제 이거는 다른 작업인데요. 이거는 이제 1인칭 시점에서 보는 것보다는 이제 매끈하게 공간 표현을 한 그런 작품인데, 이제 이 회사는 이제 사람들이 이렇게 몸의 일부가 없어졌을 때 기계로 대체하는 그런 것들을 만드는 회사입니다.
Steve Wozniak said, if you're serious about software, you should make your own hardware. And this is a testament to that attitude. So, the story in this case is it's about the infinite complexity of human hand dexterity. We simplified it in this case to 3 stereotypical ways of using the hand that is very, very human. One is the cylindrical grip, the spherical grip, and then the hooked grip.
네, 이 세 가지는 굉장히 사람만 표현할 수 있는 사람다운 그런 손의 모양인데요. 하나는 이제 원기둥을 잡고 있는 거고, 하나는 공을 잡고 있는 거고, 하나는 이제 끌어당기는 그런.
So, looking at the installation itself, it's a grid of 12 monitors double-sided.
네, 12개의 모니터가 양쪽으로 보이는 것입니다.
The cylindrical grip extends the physical beam into the screen. The spherical grip plays with these spheres, and then the hooked grip plays with color fields that interact with the installation and give the whole thing force.
네, 원기둥 모양을 잡고 있는 거는 이제 모니터 자체를 이렇게 움직이는 것과 함께 인터랙션 하고요. 공 같은 경우에는 무게 중심을 잡아서 이제 그렇게 나중에 이제 영상이 나오는데요. 그리고 세 번째 이렇게 끌어당기는 것은 아까 보았듯이 색깔을 이렇게 계속 끌어당기는 그런 것을 준비하였습니다.
And there's a bonus track which is this sort of interactive mode with the light box that you can capture your hand animations into the screens for a moment. So this is sort of the whole design idea behind this installation, was to really consider the physical aspects and the virtual aspects completely seamless. So there's a virtual gravity, there's that is affected by the physical real gravity. There's physical boundaries to the screens that affect the animations. When the devices overlap, they are kind of see-through in a virtual way. And then the fact that these 500 kilo beams that can be kind of pushed back and forth by the power of pixels is kind of the conclusion.
네, 이것은 이제 가상적인 것과 실질적인 육체적인 것이 두 개를 굉장히 매끈하게 함께 표현할 수 있도록 노력을 하였고요. 실질적인 모니터가 육체적으로 움직이고 있지만 안에 가상적인 손으로 인해서 움직이고 있고, 이제 그 가상적인 손에 이제 픽셀의 힘으로써 그 실질적인 육체적인 모니터에 힘을 가한다는 이제 그런 것을 굉장히 잘 표현하려고 했습니다.
Okay, and then this is now, so this was the sort of back to this, no, we went this sort of high-tech, very complicated electromechanical stuff to simpler and simpler and ultimately simple with people bringing their own technology. And then back to making very technically challenging, but from the interaction point of view, very sort of distant. So there's the users, and then there's the sculpture, and there's only one moment where you can interact with it directly. And now we're kind of, the next project I'm showing is kind of trying to blend these two ways of seeing.
네, 지금까지 보여드린 작품은 처음에 굉장히 하이테크한 걸로 시작해서 더 심플해지고 완전히 심플해져서 사람들이 직접 이제 테크놀로지를 가져오는 걸로 했고, 방금 전 거는 이제 조금 더 이제 기술적으로 그런 것을 필요로 하는 걸로 돌아갔는데요. 이제 다음으로 보여드릴 것은 이제 그 심플한 것과 기술적인 것을 어느 정도 융합한 그런 작업입니다.
So those of you who've been traveling around might recognize this logo. It's the logo of Deutsche Bank, the biggest bank in Germany. It's a very simple thing. It's normally blue square with the blue diagonal stripe in the middle.
네, 여행을 많이 다닌 사람들은 봤을 수도 있는데요. 이건 굉장히 유명한 이제 독일의 은행의 로고입니다.
So we were asked to create this sort of brand space for them that is sort of a storytelling space discussing their history and then their future visions.
네, 저희는 이제 이 은행의 브랜드 공간, 브랜드 스페이스를 제작해달라고 부탁을 받았고요. 이제 그들의 역사나 앞으로의 비전을 보여주는 그런 장소입니다.
And since the company doesn't do any prosthetics or other cool-looking mechanical devices, we decided to use their logo as the starting point for the design rather than the products that they have.
이곳은 이제 은행이기 때문에 그 어떤 뭔가 뭐 작품이나 물건이 있는 게 아니어서 이제 로고를 사용을 하였고요. 디자인 매터로서.
So let's start in the middle. This is sort of more like a lexical information looking at the history of the company in the form of an interactive table. It looks like a logo because the camera in this case is in the right location. If we now move the camera to the left, it looks like this. So it's this sort of an anamorphotic distortion of the logo stretched into physical space, and that is then the housing for the installation. So the visitors, by moving through the space, they kind of construct and deconstruct the object.
네, 이곳은 그 은행의 히스토리를 이렇게 보여주고 그리고 인터랙티브 테이블이 있는 그런 장소인데요. 이제 앞에서 보았을 때는 로고가 2D로 보이지만 이렇게 움직임으로 인해서 3D적인 공간이 나오면서 유저 자신이 이제 그 장소를 건축한다는 듯한 느낌을 표현을 했습니다.
And as a sort of a design inspiration, we use the guilloche patterns that you know from banknotes, the sort of fine lines that in this case serve as the interface to navigate through the stuff.
네, 그리고 그런 디자인적인 영감을 위해서 지폐 같은 데에 있는 이런 곡선들을 사용을 했습니다.
And the same visual theme was also applied to this sort of full body installation. It's using camera tracking and talking about the company in numbers based on your movement in space. The same sort of distortion.
네, 그리고 비주얼적인 요소로도 그렇게 사용을 했고요. 카메라 트래킹을 통해서 이제 그 은행의 히스토리를 보여주고 있습니다.
But these are the sort of simple things. What I wanted to talk about is this last installation. This was the sort of this was definitely the most complicated thing to do. This is an anamorphotic kind of kinetic sculpture that was originally supposed to be talking about the history and achievements of the CEOs, previous CEOs of the company. So it had like lots of loaded value judgment placed on it, and therefore it had to be the highlight of the space. And this is how it looks like. So this is sort of a preview video. It's before the opening, as that you will see in the background, some people cleaning the floors and stuff. The final video is this is just opened a few weeks ago, so I don't have proper press material yet. So here again, the design of the sculpture is directly deduced from the shape of the logo. So it's not sort of, so it would not be relevant to take it anywhere else. Now, what is more is that, so we wanted to then have this sort of physical kinetic sculpture augmented with virtual information. In this case, it's done by a couple of projectors mounted in the ceiling, that the same software that is moving the polygons on metal wires also know the places of the polygons and their alignment in space. So the same as with the pendula, there's virtual gravity that you can see pulling the particles around that matches the physical slope of the sculpture.
네, 이것은 이제 그 은행의 히스토리와 그런 이루어낸 경력, CEO들의 그런 경력들을 나타내는 하이라이트 부분인데요. 이제 저것은 키네틱 스컬프처인데 저 모양도 이제 로고에서 따왔기 때문에 이제 다른 데에 쓸 수 없는 그런 것이고요. 이제 몇 주 전에 막 오픈을 했기 때문에 영상도 프리뷰 영상인데 이제 저 키네틱 스컬프처에 프로젝션 되어 있는 저 애니메이션이 자세히 보시면 저 키네틱 스컬프처가 움직임에 따라서 중력에 의해서 저 파티클들이 움직이는 것을 보실 수 있습니다.
So, and as a little anecdote, as I said, this was supposed to be telling the history of the CEOs of the company. 4 weeks before the opening, the current CEO saw the content that had pictures, the photographs and text moving around, and he was stupefied. He felt that this is way too beautiful to be used for showing pictures. So we got to make this much more in the abstract sort of, really like as an artwork.
네, 4주 전에 아까 말씀드렸듯이 이것은 이제 원래 CEO들의 히스토리와 경력을 보여주는 장소여야 하는데 이제 현재 CEO가 4주쯤 전에 이것을 보더니 여기에는 이제 뭐 사진이나 글을 넣기엔 너무나 아름답다라고 해서 이렇게 추상적인 작품을 만들 수가 있었습니다.
But so the complicated part, of course, in this case is to create the motion of these polygons with a series of motors that are hidden in the ceiling, and then the software that you use to calculate the motion. But for the experience in the physical space, it's equally important to have the context, the lighting, the fact that the logo as a structure, the background, the audioscape, everything else together. So it's not technology for universal display of moving things in space, but it is an installation that is, all aspects of it are designed for this one purpose.
이 하나의 목적을 위해서 뭐 프로젝션이나 오디오나 이 모든 것이 한꺼번에 다 잘 되어야 한다고 하십니다.
Here you can see just a little bit of the wires from which these things are suspended. What was also interesting, this is always what happens when you start designing physical space with virtual content like this, is that there's sort of some unexpected things that happen. And in this case, since the whole, so there's the projection, but there's also the ambient lighting. So the floor patterns, the shadows became really essential about the aesthetics of the whole installation.
네, 이렇게 육체적인 것과 그런 가상적인 것을 함께하는 작품을 하게 되면 항상 예상치 못한 일들이 발생하는데요. 이제 이 경우에는 저 키네틱 스컬프처가 만들어내는 그림자가 너무나 이 작품 자체의 아름다움에 굉장히 중요한 역할을 기여하게 됐다고 하십니다.
So, shape, projection, shadows. Okay, and then as a sort of bonus track, I mentioned these 3 logos. The final thing here is, again, very, very simple analog installation. So this is the stairs that you enter the space. When you enter it, there's a mirror. And the mirror is fragmented. And left and right of the mirror, there are spotlights on the opposite wall, that when you're standing in the right place, the picture comes together.
네, 이거는 마지막에 이제 보너스 형식으로 보여드리는 건데요. 이제 저것은 거울이고 양쪽에서 프로젝션이 이렇게 나오고 있는데 제 자리에 서 있으면은 저렇게 로고가 잘 보일 수 있다고 하십니다.
Okay, so now I'm running short in time, but I have if you bear with me for one more second, I want to now take us back to the sort of what we all commonly understand as augmented reality and looking at slightly different use of it.
네, 이제 시간이 없지만 조금만 시간을 주신다면 이제 우리가 이해할 수 있는 범위에서의 AR을 소개드리려고 합니다.
This is a project of 2 of my students who few semesters ago did a project. We were looking at computational photography, and they designed this device and built it called Artificial Smile. It's a comment on the beautification that media is enforcing on us.
네, 이것은 선생님의 제자 두 분이서 만든 작품인데요. 이거는 만들어진 웃음이라는 작품으로 미디어가 이제 우리를 일부러 이렇게 웃게 강요하는 그런 것에 대한 비판입니다.
So human eyes are very perceptive of smile. So if the eyes are not smiling when the mouth is, we will know. Computers will not recognize this difference. We know that you all have cameras with smile shutters. You have cameras that have the skin beautification function. These are all using this kind of computer vision technology, very similar to what you would also use for augmented reality to change the perception of these captured images. The difference is pictures, you don't have to do it in real time for every frame. You can compute this one moment and create your still frame of augmented reality.
네, 우리들은 이제 스마일 셔터라고 해서 웃으면 찍히는 카메라도 있고 뭐 이렇게 찍으면은 굉장히 피부가 예뻐 보이게 하는 그런 것들도 있는데요. 이제 인간들은 웃으면은 웃음을 눈으로 인식하지만 컴퓨터들은 인식을 못해요. 그래서 그런 것들에 대해서 비판을 해보았습니다.
So what the students did, they built their own camera, which is actually an old mobile phone, made it look a little bit narcissistic. And then inside the camera, when you take the picture, you upload it to a computer, to a server. The server analyzes the picture and then takes the smile of somebody else and then figures it where it belongs and slaps it on your face.
네, 이것은 이제 아까 만들어진 카메라를 보셨는데요. 약간 이렇게 나르시시즘을 표현하도록 만들어졌고요. 그걸로 사진을 찍으면 억지로 웃게 만든 사진을 찍습니다.
So of course this is kind of, on one hand it's as I said, it's critical about the sort of status quo of our mediated reality, but at the same time it's using these kind of technologies that it is possible. I mean, of course, it looks horrible, and that's not the point to make this perfect. Otherwise, it would be suffering from the exact same disease as all the beautification software as well. But it's kind of highlighting different ways of looking at how we can use these technologies.
네, 이것은 당연히 이렇게 자연스럽게 웃게 보이기 위한 것이 아니고요. 그 목적이 아니라 이제 비판적으로 아까도 말씀드렸듯이 그런 기술들에 대해서 비판적으로 나가면서 반대로 그러면 우리가 이 기술로 어떤 것을 할 수 있을지를 이제 찾아내는 그런.
Now I've spent my time, so I guess as just a kind of for me the sort of closing word. I mean. Yeah, so in a way, so there are so many ways that augmented reality, I mean, it's crazy how far we have come in the last 25 years or 30 years, where on one hand the mentality hasn't changed so much, but the technological framework has really today made all these things possible. For us, we as designers, our job is to do cool stuff with these things. So there will be there's a wealth of potential and places where we can directly apply the visions of what we've had for the last 20 years about what augmented reality is supposed to be, but at the same time there's so much more that we can discover from the design point of view, maybe making things more simple, but also with tools that what we've seen earlier today. The simplicity in design may still have lots of complexity in the back end that somebody else has already solved for us. And this way we can create the next things of magic for the next generation.
네, 클로징 멘트로서 이제 우리가 AR에 있어서 얼마나 이제 멀리 왔는지를 생각하면 정말 대단하다고 생각을 하는데요. 이제 테크놀로지에 비해서 정신적인 부분은 그다지 이제 많이 향상되지 않았다고 생각을 하기 때문에 우리가 디자이너로서 해야 하는 일은 이제 멋진 것들을 만드는 것, 이 기술을 통해서 멋진 것들을 만들고 그럼으로 인해서 이제 다음 매직을 만들어내는 게 중요하다고 생각합니다.
So,
감사합니다.